I got to figure out how to get this big box, big, wider than my wingspan at 6'2", into this spot here, up to that rear tire. You see I've got a angled back here, go over the rear tire, one big box, beautiful box from Highway Products, custom made, big opening, got to get it mounted here. Let's get into it.
This is one big box at 8 feet long and 24 cubic feet of storage in just the one. There's a total of 50 cubic feet of storage on this camper, all externally, in addition to the 16-foot camper box that I built onto this 134-inch wheelbase with an EarthCruiser custom four-wheel drive conversion, which also included by them the front winch and also the ARB air compressor to operate the air lockers, which I'm now modifying those wires along with some other factory wires, add in some electrical hubs and some other future connections, as well as also connections for lights and also my second alternator.
Sometimes when you're building out an expedition camper, you've got to modify some of the chassis electronics. So obviously I have to tie into it. I've got a 12-volt alternator that I'm going to tie into, put some DC to DC converters to feed my 24-volt house battery, also to connect into some battery switches to feed both my rear and my front winches so I can have those disconnected for safety when I don't need them, have them automatically and manually be able to be connected, as well as some other loads like my big air compressor. I want to make sure that that also can be manually and automatically disconnected, so that way if I inadvertently leave it on, it doesn't run down the house batteries, because it's going to be running off the house batteries, but I make sure also they can manually, of course, control it, turn it on, or remotely as well. So I've got a whole bunch of, call it sophistication stuff in here, but also modifications I had to do. So one thing here, just as a quick modification, is this is the high-powered fuse box that the Mitsubishi Fuso comes with. It's normally mounted to the battery tray, which is right now down here on the ground, normally bolted in here and here. And that's where the battery tray is, the starter battery. Now I'm relocating that to inside my nice big Highway Products storage box that I have right here. And that's going to go inside there with also a lot of other electronics. You can see they're already starting to get laid out just roughly right here. And those are going to go inside there. So that way my 24-volt alternator, my 12-volt factory alternator go through those DC-DC converters are in this storage box instead of inside the camper. So I don't have to have Alexa wiring to go inside the camper. I can just have one wire, effectively one positive, one negative, go in and out of the camper, and that's it. Everything else will come out and be controlled out here. Everything will be in either the watertight box or waterproof electronics. So it gets a lot of those electronics outside. They're really small and compact. They can be anywhere. They can be closer to the load, which is going to reduce wiring size and need, which is better because most of those are remotely controllable and monitorable, that it's better to be outside closer to load. And also creates any of that heat load, so that way those losses are outside the camper instead of creating a heat load inside the camper, adding to air conditioning load or things like that, or just discomfort. So overall it's a good thing, plus it gives you more space inside the camper for what I need to put inside the camper. So it's all really basic, but nonetheless, this was to be mounted onto the storage tray, but since that's going away, could have mounted to the front of the box, but then it's another penetration inside the box. They have to make sure I seal it, keep water and dust from getting inside that box. And this wiring is really tight, so I couldn't really maneuver around. The way the mounts were, difficult to mount it the other way. I'll show you here. So what it is, put some standoffs here, some threaded standoffs, put a new plate in here, and then these are bolted through, of course, with stainless steel hardware. And that creates this, a really solid connection, and have access to it because the storage box even come out to here. So I've got space and stuff for that. This is also basically some other factory electronics and the ECU and stuff on the wiring. Again, we've got space in there. And then I've also mounted in some of my other electronics and stuff in here, wiring connections, things like that. And I've got this also high-powered fuse box here. These are MRBF, or marine rated battery fuses. These are really great for the really big high-powered connections because they can handle a lot of a short circuit interrupt current. And so they're really good and safe to use. I'm going to have, that's my main alternator starter connection is going to come in and land here on this post. I can feed in there my chassis electronics, my high-powered electronics to the factory connections, my connections also to a crossover to a big power connection over on the other side for other chassis electronics, and my controls for all my different lighting, front lighting, rear lighting, you know, air compressor, my steps on the other side, all kinds of stuff like that, and also my power going into this storage box to run all that kind of stuff. I've got this already mounted in there. It's super solid and stuff. So now one of the things I need to do, because this is my factory wire, you can see it's way longer than it needs to be to get right here. So I'm going to cut it and take off this 3 feet of wire. So I'm going to cut down this wire from about a 5 or 6 foot wire to about a 2 foot wire. So really nice big reduction there in the wire size, which is great. Get a little bit of efficiency, less resistance. But now you can see where I've got to come into this connection point here. I've got a pretty good angle there. Too much of an angle for a straight in connector. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bend connector, call it about a 60-degree angle, coming up over this factory wiring harness here. So I come up over all that stuff and get a little more lift over the engine and transmission for this wire to get a little more clearance for heat and stuff. I'll still probably put some heat wrap around it even though it didn't have it from the factory. But anyways, I'm going to show you how to bend one of these, put your own manual bend into it to be able to do that, to give you the bend you need. This is a 2-watt terminal, so let me show you how to do that and get an exact degree bend that you need, because you can buy these generally in a 90 or a straight like this is. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to take my lug, I'm going to go ahead and clamp it down in a vise here, and I'm going to take in this case, a threaded rod that is just a little bit smaller than this lug. I've got a couple different variants of this. But then all I'm going to do is just simply bend this down. Because these are copper, tin-plated copper lugs, they're pretty soft metal. And so as long as I have this lug, you know, laid there flat and straight, and I'm pulling this down straight or pushing it away from me straight, it should bend easily as it does. Now I'm going to stop there. Of course, all I do is make sure I have enough gap between the flat part of the lug and the bend here so I get that bend. But now you can see what I've done is already put in about a 45-degree angle in there. I can of course measure this and measure the angle I need, but I'm just going to go and fit this up against there, test that wire as it comes in, see how that is. I think I'm going to have to bend it up probably another about 15 degrees, but let's just go and see how this fits before I bend it more so I don't have to go back and forth. And you can see there's no deformation of the space going in here because I'm just gently pulling on it. Because that threaded rod is almost the same diameter as this, the load's getting spread pretty widely across where the wire goes into this lug, and because the metal's pretty soft and I've got it clamped down well and I'm not having resistance against the vise up against here, I've got enough gap between there so that this can move freely. Really, it moves easily as you saw, and so I'm just going to bend a little more, and you maybe wonder, well, am I losing the surface area in the flat part here? And you can see I'm not. Right, it's still incredibly flat all the way across. It's going to be still the same surface area going all the way across there. So I'm not, you know, causing any issues there. So now let's go try this out, and then we'll adjust this angle a little bit more up should I need to. Okay, tested out my lug. My angle is fantastic. We tested out the threaded rod inside the end of the lug. It's great, so I'm going to go with it. So now what I need to do is figure out exactly where to cut this. This is a moment of no return, right? Because I'm going to cut this big factory wire that connects to the alternator, factory alternator and starter. And I'm going to basically, I've got a really good spot right here to cut it. It had quite a pretty material crease here, probably from I think it was probably a wire connector here that was holding it in place, one of these factory ones. The way this wire ran down, you can see here's probably that factory wire connector right here that wrapped around there and created those crimps in there. But this actually ran down alongside really the transmission, just like this DC cable is, and came out through here through this other connector, and then from here it wrapped kind of around the back of the battery and up into the battery. So it added a lot more length than needed, plus a lot more heat because it came really close to this exhaust. As you can see, this DC cable, the negative cable, also does 8 to 10 inches there between those two. So they come really close to each other. So by getting this, routing this positive cable up high up here. I'm getting it away from that heat, a foot away from the transmission, and still a good distance from the back of the engine, at least as far, if not farther, than what it was in a factory run. Further, of course, from the exhaust. On the negative cable here, it does connect in the base of the back of the bell housing here between the engine and transmission. So I'm going to probably keep that the same. That's fine, but I'm going to route it up high like this to connect into my DC connection in the back of my box. I've got some negative posts here on the sides. I've got them outlined here where there's already a welded nut under the back of the chassis frame rails from the factory. So I can tie into these already for negatives. So that's great. I can use those and have multiple negative connections to the chassis rails. So I'm going to connect into multiple negatives on my big box here, my big storage box where a lot of my electrical is. And that'll also tie into my house battery system from those studs on the back and all sorts of things. So I have a lot of good negative connections. So anyways, that's how you bend one of these. Really simple, really easy. Get any really angle you need or want. So I'm going to put that in there. And then I've also got to wire in my connection into my winch because I'm obviously rewiring that. And I'll show you what I've got going on there if I can find it. This is the front winch connection right here and the little tiny wire for the ARB air compressor for just the lockers. This already I'm going to shorten. You can see I've got a lot of extra lengths. I only need to come in over here, so I can also take out about as much as around 18 to 24 inches out of these wires, so I can shorten those as well. So I'm going to do that as well. So I've got to also connect this in and shorten it and put a new lug in this and get whatever angle I need on this one as well. I'm going to go ahead and replace that with the tinned one since it's sitting outside. It's going to be in a better protected spot where it's going to be now and under a cover, unlike before it was just kind of on the battery post. So now I'm going to have it on a much better connection. I'm going to put a bigger wire that's going to connect between these two, so it's going to have a better connection overall and shorter. Here it goes. Got to cut this finally wrapped cable. Take about 2 feet out of it, cut it down to here, hope my length's right to get over to my remote control, and same with the little tiny ARB air compressor wire line. Take about 18 inches out of that, and this little inline fuse. But I'm going to put a real fuse into it, or a much more better fuse. It is a 30 amp load, so this little fuse pushes up against about its limit at about 30 or 40 amps. I think this is going to be a better option, of course, and it's also going to be visible. So I'm going to cut this back and do the same thing. Well, when you cut the wire, it also cuts that sheath. I need to take this sheath back, and I don't know any good way to cut it back. It's a pretty darn durable sheath. Using this razor blade on here, trying to cut through without, of course, cutting through the wire insulation. It's not so great. Let's try a different way. Maybe a hook razor blade. That might do the trick. I'm going to try this little one first before I move to the big one. So in case I mess anything up here. There we go. That works well. So the hooked razor blade. Pretty sweet little tool, isn't it? Let's get it back far enough where I can also heat shrink around the fitting. Okay. Now I should be able to just take some really good sharp shop scissors, cut that off. Boom. That should work. Okay. Let's go repeat. Big cut. If I got my length right. There it is. It's done. No turning back. Okay. Hooked razor blade.
And there we go. Easy as that to take out about 6 feet of wire for these two connections and improve their wires and lugs and give them really good fuse connections right straight to the alternator.
Let's get this stripped for the connector. This one is going to come in also with an angle. Okay, so again, I've got my angle bent here. I'm pushing this all the way up against there. So I get as much of that copper wire down in here while I go to tighten this up. Okay, so I've got my little one all nicely heat shrunk down, my bent terminal or lug. There's the other one with a really big, can't touch it yet, still too hot. Really big, thick protective coating to go over this even and over that insulation over this, so I've got nice, hopefully good, solid connection there. Yep, here goes nothing. Hope I got my length right. And there it is. Okay, let's get the lug, let's clean it. Let's get the lug, strip it. Bring that back. Make sure that's all cleaned off. Clean this one off too, because I'm going to reuse this wire for the other side. So 2 identical wires, same size, manufacturer, everything. This will be used for the other connection. Lug ready to go. Clean her up. Ow! Got a cut on my hand. And that rubbing alcohol really feels good in there. Now, this is a key one to get just right. Alright. If you remember my other videos, I always like to take the insulation a little bit more off so I can push that copper right into this spot here. Some of that will fit into this spot, not just right up to this spot where it says full circumference. So let's go strip that off.
And there's definitely a challenge with cutting these wires just up to that chassis rail. So it's really hard to get in there and strip them as well as crimp them.
Okay. Gosh, I keep getting one strand. There we go. Oh God, that's heavy. Let's give it a try. I can't see anything. Everything's blocking everything. Good. One thing out of there. All right. Here's my good wire cutters for this size. Here's my good wire stripper. It's going to be really tough to get this in here. This should work. Still pain for sure. Alright, come on. There we go. Make sure she's positioned well. Wires in there good. I can't mess this up. I will be replacing this wire. Put it all the way in. I cannot see. Okay, that's a perfect crimp, thankfully. See? Great. Now I'm going to do one more around there, just make sure I've got a good, solid crimp. I can even get in there.
When operating this big wire hydraulic crimper, it really helps to have 2 sets of hands, one to hold the wire, another to operate the crimper, since it takes 2 hands just to operate that. And I like to do at least 2 crimps down the barrel of the lug, one towards each end. Make sure I have a good solid crimp.
All right, let's check it out. All right, that's solid. That is good. Okay, it's slipping the heat shrink insulation over that. Let's heat shrink it. Let's cut it long enough to get over that plastic wrap. And let's get this baby placed. And then let's build the next one as well on that to come over here and connect in here. All right. Okay, we're going to do one more. This time we're going to bend this one flat to almost 90. We do about a 70-degree angle, right at about there. So it's going to have a good bend. Make sure when I set this up in the vise here that I give myself plenty of room for this to bend down. Could almost put like a height to degree measurement here. And I don't have to heat this up, but I could. Just, I'm going to take it down right there to that lug section. See, that gets me about 45. I'm going to need to go a little bit more, quite a bit more. So again, I'm going to give more space in here, tightening that down. My bending tool, bending rod, my lever arm. Let's see, that probably takes me about a 60. That might work really well. Let's go test this out. Okay, I think I've got just the right angle for this. So I'm going to go and take this wire out. I've got it finger tightened down into place here on the lug that's going to be on. Routed the way it's going to be. And so I can pull it right out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to crimp this outside of here because it'll be a heck of a lot easier. But then make sure that I line this up where I marked was for the lug. So now all I need to do is make sure I cut the wire and put this in the right angle relative to that angle, so I don't really have any torquing or twisting of this wire. So I need to cut it right there, strip back, and it should be good to go. All right, let's get on it.
And in addition to the angle of the lug, I always try to make sure that the position of the lug, as far as its radial direction, is also accurate to how it's going to be connected, so there's not this twisting on the wire. And you notice here I use this cordless DeWalt heat gun. I love it. It's great for getting these tight, small spaces.
Okay, so I've got my little one all nicely heat shrunk down, my bent terminal or lug. And I've got the other one with a really big, can't touch it yet, still too hot, really big, thick protective coating to go over this even, and over that, the insulation over this. So I've got a nice, hopefully good, solid connection there.
And with that, I went ahead and finished up the heat shrinking ends, got all these lugs connected, and started getting everything interconnected. And in my next video, I'm going to go over more about this and how it looks in a box. But this really involved a lot of tools, but it did remove about 35 pounds of steel off this, including about 10 feet of wire, and ultimately only added about 15 more net pounds, and yet gained 24 cubic feet of storage, including also space for the battery to go inside a locked cabinet. I actually added a bigger battery than the factory battery, updated that of course. Also cut these really specialized wire connectors for some of the factory lights and so forth, and connectors I just couldn't find a matching connector for, and then wired these all into a nice little terminal strip within a weather tight box that's fairly easy to access, so I can go ahead and access these different lights and things like that I need to. And then we're going to roll this big storage cabinet into its place, bolt it up, hooking up all these wires, all these new ground connections, deposit connections, and start hooking up all the DC to DC connectors inside the box. It's going to be great. Thanks. I'll come up with that next video and share more of those details with you. Thank you for watching, and subscribe it.